What's good, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Really excited to have you. My name is Karl Weiche, and today I have a really exciting video. One of my mentors is Hughes, and Will was working at the head of digital at Organifi, right? And he came to Organifi when it was at 18 million yearly run rate, and over the course of 1.5 years, he scaled it from 18 million to over $100 million in yearly revenue with creative breakthrough ideas, right? So he had the challenge of understanding how he can take the business and 5 to 6 exit in less than 2 years, which is crazy quick growth, right? And I've been working with him for over half a year now in a lot of one-on-one sessions, just talking about mental frameworks and how to get creative breakthrough ideas, right? How can you change your perspective and how can you think differently to really get ahead of your competition and also have these ideas that can 5 or 10x your business instead of just like small 5 or 10% increases, right? And really quickly wanted to show you, here we are in Miami. This is another quick video that I posted on my channel with him. And this is the guy that I'm talking about, Will Hughes, a great guy, super fucking smart guy. And let's get back to this view. For this video, I recorded one of the sessions, right? And I'm paying this guy thousands and thousands of dollars to invest his time and spend time with me and teach me on this stuff, right? And I recorded one of the sessions which is focusing on how to change your perspective and coming up with new ideas. And this is the video that you're going to see today. So this is insanely valuable. You will not find this anywhere else online. This is exclusive on my channel. Because really Will turned into a friend of mine and he's allowing me to share this with you guys, with the audience of this channel. And I hope you enjoy. This is super fucking valuable. Again, it costs a fuck ton of money. And this is literally one of the coaching sessions that we have been going through in our one-on-one mentoring. So enjoy it.
Okay, so let's jump into this. This is it's an interesting little training I've got for you, which is a way to change your perspective so that you can think more creatively. And so I build these case studies on how to think differently and how I've been able to scale up 2 different companies to 100 million in revenue as their head of growth. And I like to use people that have done something extraordinary, famous CEOs, or in this case, we're gonna talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson, and sometimes not so famous people, but they've done something extraordinary. And I'll build that as a case study, and then I'll put it into a framework that you can pull down and actually use in your business. So what I want you to understand is we all have this hidden limitation. And it's really important to understand this. So we all think in these thought patterns, which are really good for thinking efficiently. Over time, our brains learn to shortcut getting to answers as quickly as we can, right? So if you're faced with a new problem in your business or a new problem in your life, and it's similar to something you've had in the past, your brain's going to shortcut getting to the answer or the solution or the approach that you're going to take faster because it's seen something similar before. And that's really good for efficient thinking, right? It's how you can multitask. It's why you can do 1,000 things at once. And that's great. That's what's made us successful. But it's incredibly limiting when it comes to creative thinking. So it's the antithesis of creative thinking. And so what we have to do is understand we have these thought patterns, and to be creative and to be innovators, we actually have to break free of the thought patterns. And a way I can sort of illustrate this to you is this visual on the screen. So if you go to a news website or an article website, we all know if you're going to like the New York Times or the Washington Post, that the content is on the left side of the screen. And you can see the eye tracking here. This is a heat map of eye tracking. And so we know what's going on at the top in the right rail, right? It's the banner ads. And it's called banner blindness. I think we've all heard that phrase before. But what's interesting here is that your brain is trained to go right for the content. It doesn't see the banners at all. But if you're thinking about this in the context of making decisions in your business, right, to solve problems, or what's a path to achieve an aggressive growth goal, you're limiting your vision. You're not looking at the top and the right in this visual example here. And what if the elegant solution, the more creative solution, is hiding there? And so even look at this heat map on the right, Carl, like people don't even read all the way to the far right. Like they're kind of filling in the information, their thought pattern, right? Again, sort of filling in the information, and they're sticking to the far left rail. So they're missing what's over here completely. Now, when you're reading a blog, that's fine. But if you're trying to think creatively about your business, it's not so fine, right? It's blinding you, it's blinding your vision for what's possible. So it limits your creative thinking, because we all have this established approach to solving problems. It's the brain figuring out how to be efficient. But because of that, we don't think about what's an alternative solution. What's a more creative solution? Is there a more creative solution? Is there something that I could come up with that's more unique, that would give me far better results, right? And so this thought pattern locks you into seeing things with tunnel vision, one single perspective. And that's just very limiting as an entrepreneur. And we want to break free of that to make you more creative. So Neil deGrasse Tyson says, the view of Earth from Earth is very different from the view of Earth from space, right? Of course, in the first example, he's going for a hike through the woods. You can see the trees and the grass and the rivers and whatever. And of course, if you're looking from space, it's a completely different perspective, right? You're viewing the same thing from a massively different perspective. And that's what we want in business. We want to be able to have that power to consider the answer or the path, the solution to the problem or the path that we want to go down. And then we want to be able to consider an alternative answer. Is there a creative answer? And if we can break free of the one single perspective, you can be much more creative. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So when you're viewing things from different perspectives, you're going to notice, very different things. And what I'm teaching here is I want people to understand how to change your perspective to see the opportunities that you would otherwise miss. And a quote that I like for this is, I want you to see what you don't and your competitors can't. And simply by taking one extra step will unlock this for you. Because in business, we're stuck in this thought pattern and this one single perspective that limits our vision. So we want to use this as a superpower to break free of that and get a second perspective. So I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson was on it was an interview recently. I can't remember his podcast or YouTube, but anyway, he referenced this study, and it's just a good illustration of this, which is Gallup, the Gallup poll. They do surveys, and they do a survey year over year around crime and safety. And they ask people every single year for the last 30 years, do they feel more safe or less safe than the year before? And every single year for the last 30 years, people are reporting they feel less safe than the previous year. But the reality is, and he referenced the second study, the reality is that violent crime is actually going down. We're actually more safe than we were 30 years ago. So our perspective is we're less safe, but the reality is we're more safe. So our perspective is actually wrong. And it's wrong because of our perspective being there's more cameras everywhere. There's more TV shows about crime and cop shows. We see more of it than we've ever seen before. And we see more violent crime that scares us, like school shootings. And because of that, it makes us feel less safe. But in reality, we're more safe. So I just want that to sink in, right? So what I want you to understand is your perspective can be wrong. And when you have that thought process, it can shatter your ego a little bit and help you to think about what's an alternative solution. And what I'm going for is, can you come up with a second solution that might be more creative? And the question I like to ask myself in these moments of being, when I'm doing a creativity little exercise, how do I solve this business problem? Or how do I achieve this aggressive growth goal? Ask yourself, what if the perspective I have is actually wrong? Because it kind of breaks you free of that ego. But what I want to caution you on this question, don't let this question serve as a way to second guess your first solution. It's not trying to, tap into your limiting beliefs or your self-doubts or questioning your decision-making. Don't let it do that. Instead, look at this as a fun, even exciting creativity question. Well, what if there's an even better solution if I ask this question? What if I can find something more elegant, more creative? And so I use this question that way. And sometimes I get an answer and sometimes I don't. But it's an unlock to getting a second perspective. Does that make sense too? Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the example. It was same for us in the beginning of the business. Everybody was preaching to cold call and cold email people, right? So have this like outbound sales mechanism to get clients and make money. And that was always our perspective, and we tried to optimize for that. And then like one day we tried to get a new perspective, and we asked ourselves, what if we can turn this like whole play around and make our dream clients come to us so we can work with them, right? So I see like
that's my favorite question. So yes. Yeah, hell yeah. Perfect. Okay, so using this question is how you get a second perspective, right? It's a small little unlock. And by the way, it takes no time, right? The total time investment here for what I'm going to show you today is probably like a minute. And you'd only use it when you're in those creative thinking moments. Hey, we're trying to figure out how to create a better subscription program, than anybody else. Or even, how do we double our revenue by the end of the year? When you're in those creative moments, that's when you want to stop and look, yes, go around your normal thought process that served you well. It's made you successful to this point. But what we're unlocking is creativity. And we want to unlock it. This is just an example of one way to unlock it, by asking that question. What if you're wrong? It shatters the ego when you think, oh shit, I might be wrong. Just be careful. Don't let it go to the negative side of the equation of self-doubt. It's not what it's meant. It should be exciting. Like, oh shit, maybe there's something better here. So just use the question that way. Okay, so let me show you a case example of a business that was failing, but the CEO had a shift in perspective and it became one of the fastest growing companies of all time. And the company was called TinySpec. They were founded in 2010, and it was originally a multiplayer online role-playing game, and the game was called Glitch. And they had raised a bunch of money. It was $15 million across 2 different rounds to build and launch this online game. But when the game came out, it actually didn't do well. People thought the game was confusing. They didn't really like the world that was being developed, and the adoption rate of the game was low, and the retention rate of the game was even worse. And so the company was failing and about to go out of business. But to the great credit of the founder, he was able to break free of his ego, which when you're a CEO of a company that's raised $15 million, changing your perspective on what's valuable and what your business actually is really difficult, right? These CEOs, they get their identity wrapped up into the company. And he was able to break free of that. And he saw a new opportunity, and it came from this unexpected direction. And what he saw was they had actually built this internal productivity tool just for their own company to work with their remote staff overseas. And they found this tool just so useful and so addictive. They started sharing it with friends at other companies. And those companies immediately attached to this tool as well. So he shifted, instead of going out of business, which is where they were, they shifted and doubled down on this tool, which became Slack. They recognized how valuable the tool was for them. They shared it with friends. They realized the commercial potential when those companies loved the tool as much as they did. And so they shifted the business, and Slack got to $1 billion, right? A unicorn company in only 8 months. And what's cool about this example is they didn't build the company to launch Slack. So they didn't have an advertising strategy, right? They did 0 advertising out of the gate. They didn't even have a CMO. This was all word of mouth because the CEO had the ability to look at things from a different direction and say, oh shit, there's something better here. And that's really difficult to do when you get locked in the weeds of a business. Your identity gets locked into you being right all the time. And, even the business that you're in is the only business, right? Your opinion is the only one that matters. And it's hard to break free. And that's why that question is the unlock, right? What if I'm actually wrong is a way to break that ego a bit and open your mind up. So Slack currently valued at 23 billion in revenue and it's used by 77% of the Fortune 500, right? So badass. So this is just giving you a second perspective. It gives you a chance to see things differently and find those opportunities. And what I'm really after, right, are the innovations that you wouldn't find otherwise. So I just want you to have this second perspective. So let me give you a second example. This is Airbnb. So Airbnb had launched a campaign called Live There back in 2016. And up to that point, they had been marketing Airbnb as a cheaper alternative to hotels, right? They're positioning themselves as a cheaper way to go. But they shifted the perspective of their marketing in this campaign. And what they shifted it to was they were encouraging travelers to experience the place they're going to, you know, Paris, Rome, whatever, have an experience like you're a local, right? We don't want you to be a tourist and go there for 2 days. We want you to be a local. So it was a total shift in campaign, and the campaign, again, called Live There. And this is sort of the start of the movement, right? Where people are like, you and I have both done it recently. I just went to Brazil for 6 weeks and lived remotely, right? Instead of going to Brazil for a week or 10 days, I went for 6 weeks and lived like a local. I just worked from there. But every weekend I traveled around and did really cool stuff. And I stayed in Airbnbs, right? So travelers at that moment weren't satisfied with just visiting these destinations. They wanted the authentic local experience. And that's what Airbnb was tapping into. So now other companies that they're competing with are marketing cheaper accommodations, cheaper tours, while Airbnb is creating the platform for authentic local experiences. And here's the results. From 2015 to 2016, their revenue went up almost $1 billion, from 1.7 billion to 2.6 billion. Now, obviously, you can't put all of that growth on this campaign, but it was a wildly successful campaign that helped them in this moment. So it was this shift in perspective that got them there, right? So, you know, any perspective change we can do can reveal new information. And so this is kind of the silly example, but the movie Dead Poet Society, right? Robin Williams has everybody stand on top of a desk. But if you've ever done it, the room really does look different. And so a literal change in your view can reveal new information in business. And we're just trying to unlock that when you're in creative thinking mode, which, you know, for you, Carl, it's probably, you know, in a 40-hour work week, you're probably only in a creative mode a few times a week. And this process should only take you a minute or two, but we want to give you different ways to change your perspective and see if there's something more creative out there, right? So changing your perspective can reveal new information. And I just want you to be constantly looking at things from a different way, right? That's what I'm trying to get to. So let me give you one more example of the way I just make it click in my head. So when you're working through a business problem, something you're trying to solve, or achieving a goal, just first go about the normal way you would approach coming up with a solution, right? Get your own first person perspective the way you always would. And then what we're trying to teach here is now get a second perspective. And the way I like to think about that, or another way to think about that, is I like to think about other people that are working in the business or around the business. And what would they think? Because again, that unlocks a second perspective. So this is just an example, just to illustrate it for you. So let's say I'm doing growth planning. Let's say I'm the CEO of a D2C brand, and I'm doing growth planning for the next year. And I'm looking at what we've done over the last 12 months, and I'm thinking, you know, some things went well for us in the last year. Some things, you know, went poorly for us in the last year. And I think if you kind of balance the two out, that we're probably going to have a very modest growth in the coming year, maybe 5%. So that might be my perspective. But then if I go to like a senior sales executive in the company and I ask them, they might say, yeah, but you know, I've lost the last 10 deals in a row to our competitor who's got something better than us. And I think we're actually going to lose traction. We're going to fall by 25% next year, right? So he's got a different perspective. He's boots on the street, right? And then maybe you then think of a third perspective of like an investor. And an investor can see, you know, across 20, 30, 40, 50 different companies. And he might see your industry from a different angle. And he might say, well, actually, if you just make this one small tweak to your business, you can crush that competitor. And then I can throw some investment in and we can amp up some marketing. And I think you could actually grow by 15, 20% next year. right? So just, it's a way to just, how do we get a second perspective? I like to sometimes think about, what is my perspective first? And then what might an investor or a mentor, an outside expert, what would someone like that think about the same problem? Because once you start thinking in the way they would consider it, you're thinking differently. You're no longer stuck in that thought pattern. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So what I'm after is I want you to see what you don't and your competitors can't, because then you're not taking this step. Normally, you're going as fast as you can. You're getting to the first solution as fast as you can, and you're moving on. And this is a way to shift that perspective and unlock creativity. So back to Neil deGrasse Tyson, he says, we need exposure to other ways of thinking. And that's just such a great quote. Like, how often do you sit around and think about the way that you think? One of my friends, a founder of a musical company out of the UK, a really good buddy of mine, Christopher, went through the liquid mine, and he said, it's really interesting. He said he spends thousands and thousands of dollars a year on training and going to conferences and masterminds. And he said, but no one invests in how you think. And it's actually the most important tool that we have. And so all I'm teaching here is just some little, in this one is just a little, trick to unlock that creativity in a very lightweight manner, right? A really easy thing to do, very little time, and a really high ROI. So I'm just trying to unlock creativity. And so what Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about is he's got a new book out now. It's called The Cosmic Perspective. And he says that we all feel like we're at the center, we're at the center of the universe at times, right? The world revolves around us. And certainly entrepreneurs are that way, right? The world revolves around the CEO. And what you do see a whole lot is the ego getting caught up in the business and the CEO thinking they're always right. And that's a problem. That's a vision limitation. It's a thought pattern limitation, a vision limitation, right? So our perspective and our thought pattern are giving us a really narrow view. And so what Neil is saying is, if you can get a size adjustment on the vastness of the universe, it can actually shatter your ego a bit, the way I was talking about earlier. And once you shatter your ego, it allows you to see a second solution. And that's what we're after. Can you take an extra 15, 30, 60 seconds and break free of your ego and think of a second solution? And at times, that can really be an unlock to creativity. So the way he does it in his book, the way he's trying to shatter the ego is, well, put yourself in context of the universe, right? There's over 100 billion stars, and there's billions of galaxies out there in the universe, like our own Milky Way. And don't forget, you're standing on a rock that's moving through space at 67,000 miles an hour, which that one's always, I don't know, that one always makes me feel a little weird. The Buddhists will teach that thing, and I'm kind of like, I don't know, it's a little Zen, a little woo-woo for me, but it's also reality, right? It's the facts. And once you can kind of break free of the world revolves around you and you're actually a very tiny piece of the world, his quote is, it can put your life into perspective and it might make you feel less significant. So it's another just trick to shatter the ego, right? Once you shatter the ego of I'm always right, I'm CEO, there's only one way to do this, it unlocks you to look at things from a second perspective. Right. And it might even and the question I like to use again is, what if I'm wrong? It gets you to the same place. Right. So it opens your mind to other views that you wouldn't have otherwise. So what I'm after here is, I want you to have the ability to change your perspective so that you can see things more creatively, so that you can find a more innovative solution than the first thing that comes at you. So let me just summarize what we've talked about. So number one, we're limited by these thought patterns. Very few people understand that. And even if you can intellectually understand it, I don't think we realize how significant of a problem this is. We approach solving problems or achieving goals the exact same way we always have. So you can't see the obvious solution that might be staring you in the face. And that's why, like, when someone does create something new and innovative, it's so, a lot of times it's just so obvious. Like, God, why didn't I see that? Right? You can't see it. You can't see the forest for the trees. You're thinking from one way, one perspective. And so it's an unlock for that is, well, what if your perspective is wrong? right? Just like that Gallup poll on crime. Very often our perspective is wrong, or at least there's another perspective that could be much more creative or innovative when it comes to business. And learning this little technique can totally give you a competitive advantage, right? It gives you a broader vision for creativity and innovation. So my challenge to you is, I want you over the next 7 days to find a good example for you, either a problem that's going on in your business today. The example I would always throw out is like, well, how do I create a better subscription program that would give me a 20% higher lifetime value than anyone else in my industry? Right? That's a problem in your business. Or if something broke, then maybe your autoresponder series broke or something like that. Or what's a big goal you're trying to achieve? So select a problem or a goal you're trying to achieve. And what I want you to do is I want you to write down for me and share it with me, but I want to see what's the first approach you came up with, right? What's the typical solution you've come up with? Great. Go about it the way you always would. Then when you're done with that, I want you to provide a completely different perspective and a completely different solution that's not, that's completely unique to the first one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I already have like a good problem in mind that I'm all good with.
Okay, perfect. So what I want you to do in this exercise is come up with the first answer, the logical answer, the way your brain always works. Give me that obvious, and why this is both good for the efficient brain and the problem at the same time. Give me the obvious answer, right? The obvious answer to building a subscription program is, let me go find a company that I really look up to, and I'm just going to rip off their model. That's the obvious answer, right? I want you to push beyond the obvious answer. Now give me the non-obvious answer. So give me the obvious one, right? Maybe they're really good at subscription and maybe you should emulate them, but I want you to think creatively. And now give me the non-obvious answer, right? Change your perspective. And I just gave you a couple ways to do the unlock, right? So Margaret Atwood is an author. She wrote the TV show Handmaid's Tale. And the way she says it is, think about the uncommon point of view. That's another unlock for me. The non-obvious answer or the uncommon point of view is an unlock. And just a couple examples of that with massive success are like, Airbnb, right? It's a pretty uncommon point of view when Airbnb first launched to be renting your couch to strangers. It's kind of an insane concept when it first rolled out. And in fact, when they first went around to raise money, it's a famous story you can Google up online, but it said, their first investors they met with literally laughed at them and said, I hope this isn't the business or the only business you guys are working on. I hope you have something better, because no one's going to let strangers in their home, right? It's actually an insane concept. It's an uncommon point of view. How about Impossible Burger, right? How do you create, they wanted to roll out a bunch of products around plant-based meats that taste like real meat. And it's just an uncommon point of view, but Impossible is now at 1.7 billion in revenue. And then last, how about Netflix, right? They were crushing it as a DVD subscription business, and way ahead of consumer adoption, they flipped to streaming, right? They were looking at it a second perspective, right? Where's the world going? And that's another good question to ask yourself, right? Like, look at ChatGPT today. There's obvious applications for ChatGPT for people in digital marketing right now, this minute, but what's it going to be in 2 years, right? That's what the Netflix example would be here. What is ChatGPT going to be in 5 years? And how could you be thinking differently on how to use it today versus everybody else? So there's just an exercise of reframing the mind. Give me the non-obvious answer, the uncommon answer for your second perspective. And look, you're not going to get a big creative breakthrough every time you use this, but even if it's 1 in 4 or 2 in 4, it's 50% of the time you're getting more creative. And sometimes those ideas are going to be far superior and have much higher ROI than the obvious answer. So it's a really cool just unlock. Okay, so the last thing I just want to make sure you do is I put the training up on my website that I just want you to watch this as homework. So I told you I presented at Oxford University last summer, and I've put this training up online, and it's about a 35 minute training. It's recorded, and this is just homework for you before our next session. But I just want you to go watch that training because it gets into how to change your perspective And I give you some various techniques there, right? I give you some other ways to unlock it, like what's being overvalued and what's being undervalued in your business, as well as how can you look at things from different angles, altitudes, and directions. So you can go unlock it on the website there. So, or you know what, I'll just email it to you. So I'm just gonna email it over to you. But I want you to watch that so we can talk about it live next time. Does that work?
Yeah, that would be perfect if you could just email over.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. All right. So any questions on what we've done so far?
I really like the perspective change. Would you say that, like, as you said, in kind of like in real life, does it have to also like change the environment, for example?
Say that one more time. Is that like another unlock, is to change the environment that you're in?
Yeah, because what I found is that like when I'm in the typical pattern and the typical routine, I used to have like a lot of recurring and always the same thoughts and things and
Yes.
the same ideas.
Yes. Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, it's why it's overseas travel so important, right? Soon as you start living in a different environment and people who think differently, like again, I was just in Brazil for 6 weeks, and their attitudes towards, I mean, almost everything are very different from Americans, right? When it comes to money and travel and careers and what's their definition of success and family and partying, like sex, like all of these things are very different. And so when you put yourself in those other environments in the way that other people are thinking, it's a big unlock, right? And so what you're just saying is, maybe you're being more simplistic in the way you're saying the question is, just changing your routine and dropping yourself into another location can be an unlock. So yes, I would totally agree with that.
And the second thing would be, it's always like easy to get one logical answer quick. What is your process to like not over obsess with the first logical answer that comes to mind, but to like dig deeper and get like come to like the second answer that's not so obvious?
Yeah, so I mean that's what I try to just give you here. And what I'd really say is I would use that question. And honestly, this shouldn't, if you're in creative thinking mode a couple of times a week, right? I hope it's 4 or 5 times a week, but let's just say 4 times a week. You have to recognize when you're in creative thinking mode, right? So when you're just in execution mode, hey, I got to build this funnel, hey, I got to write this piece of copy, whatever, that's just execution. But if you're thinking about what should this script be, well, that's more creative. If you're thinking about the strategy for something, now you're in creative thinking mode. If you're thinking about how to solve a problem, creative thinking mode. And so when you're in creative thinking mode, what I want you to do is, I just want you got to recognize it first. Hey, this is a moment for creativity. And I want you to stop, come up with the first solution. And then I want you to stop and look, it shouldn't take you more than like a minute to do this. But I want you to then give me the second solution and the non-obvious answer. And that by just asking yourselves these questions is what I'm going for, Carl, which is, A, if you just do it consciously around, okay, I just provided myself answer A, let me come up with a different answer B, that alone is enough to get you rolling. But if you need some of the tips and tricks to kind of get you there, that's why I was giving you the example of like Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's why I was giving the example of ask yourself, what if your perspective is wrong? Because it just, once you say, well, what if the first perspective is wrong? And you're, again, coming from a place of excitement that there might be a better solution out there, not that the first one is wrong, not, because I don't want self-doubt to creep in, but it's just an unlock to the mind to break you free of the thought pattern and have you thinking differently and looking for a different, maybe even an opposite solution. So I just want you to ask that question, right? What's a non-obvious? Okay, you got the obvious approach. Literally ask yourself, what's the non-obvious approach? What's another approach? What if I was wrong? And what would a mentor, what will, in this case, right? I'm helping mentor you, or an investor or a coach. What would a mentor say about this same problem, right? So that's what I'm after. And those are just the unlocks for me.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I really enjoyed the session. Then I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Cool. Awesome, man. Great to see you. See you next week. And don't forget the homework, and we'll talk next week.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Peace.